So let's say that we are starting with a blank project. There's nothing here. This is Cubase. And the first thing that we would do here, and with another sequencer, it would be a very similar process, is add an instrument track. In this case, for this instrument track, I'm going to use Contact. So as I create this track, it's going to load Contact. It's an instrument track. So even though we just see one track, it actually has two parts. And I'm going to explain this real quick. In the past, we would have a synth, right, which is basically a unit with a hard drive that has samples in them. Then we would have a MIDI keyboard. This is the sampler. This is the synth. And so basically we would connect a MIDI cable from here to here. This is MIDI. And this unit would have an audio output. And we would connect that to sort of like our mixing board. So this is MIDI, and this is audio. So there are two parts of this. There's the MIDI world and then the audio. And actually this should be like this, right? Because this unit where the samples are stored receive MIDI information and triggers the samples as audio files. And then maybe this unit has multiple outputs. So maybe we have 4 stereo pairs maybe, and then we have another sampler here that also has multiple stereo pairs. And we would combine all these audio tracks and mixing board. Now, when you are setting up a template, and depending on the complexity and also depending on the software, sometimes you are actually going to see what we just saw. And we're going to have a series of MIDI tracks, and then we're going to have the aux returns. So basically it's MIDI audio, MIDI audio, MIDI audio, MIDI audio, right? And the way this is going to go is the MIDI is going to send the information to sort of like Contact, and Contact is going to transform this to audio, and we're going to have several contacts, and it's going to go like this. So MIDI, Contact, audio back to aux, MIDI, Contact, aux, MIDI, Contact, audio back to aux. Now sometimes though, what we're going to have is a multi-timbral contact. So it's going to be Contact, but it will have multiple patches, and each one of these patches is going to be routed to a different aux. So MIDI audio back to aux, MIDI audio back to aux, MIDI audio back to aux channel, just using one Contact instance. So we're going to have 16 of these per Contact instance. But sometimes we're going to load a track like this one that is going to look like a track, and you're going to see the fader and the pan knob and the inserts and all that. But actually it includes the MIDI part of things as well as the audio. But it looks just like one track, like this. Is this track here. It has this icon, looks like a track, and it receives MIDI from all MIDI inputs, as you can see, meaning from this device, and receives the audio from the instrument that's connected to, which in this case is this Contact instance here. Alright, so we're going to create the template. These are the tracks that we are going to create. We're going to create 3 groups of tracks. In this video, we're going to create the first group of tracks, which are going to be the sketching patches or fast action patches. Those are the tracks that every composer will have some of these tracks at the beginning of their template. And it's a group of tracks that sort of give you the quick sound, like the orchestral sound or the string sound, or you will have the pianos or the choir. Those tracks are like, you know, when you are sketching or when you need that big sound and you're not going to orchestrate the entire thing, you're going to have those tracks there. And it's a very basic group of tracks that I summarized here, and it's going to be full orchestra long notes, full orchestra short notes, and then we're going to have the full section, so the strings, brass, and woods, both long and short notes, and then a little bit of orchestral and epic ensemble type of percussion, and other tracks like piano, choir, and a few more things. So that's the first group of tracks, the fast action patches. That's this video. We're going to be loading this one in the next 2 videos. We're going to load the strings basic tracks, and we're not going to have 200 strings tracks here. We're going to just load the very basics. And in the next one, we're going to load sort of like what I call the orchestral enhancers. Basically just a little bit of percussion and a few more things. We've got the tam-tam, snare, timpani, grand casa, drums, shakers, piatti, cymbal swells, but also a few more things like celesta, arp, etc. So we would start with a blank template again, like this. We would load that track, and then in here we are gonna create the first sound. In this case, it's gonna be orchestral short notes, meaning a patch that if we hit the keyboard gives us sort of like the orchestral sound, something like this. Now these patches are going to look something like this or like this, which when you hit one note, it's a bunch of instruments that you are actually hearing at the same time, and that's what creates that sound. So the trick here is not to load the instruments, but to balance them in a way that makes it sound like a real well-balanced orchestra. And that's what we're gonna be doing here. So inside the Nucleus library, we'll go to Instruments and then Single Patches, Full Ensembles, and then we're gonna start with the strings. We're gonna select the spiccato patch, which is basically like a short staccato. And just so you know, inside this tight folder is the same samples. It's just that the patch is configured with the sample start time at 0. So we're not gonna use those because we can configure that later on. And again, we will select this spiccato patch and we'll move it here. And this is gonna load this library. The next thing that we are gonna load are the woodwinds, brass, and choir. So I'm gonna go here to Full Ensembles, woodwinds, and I'm gonna load the staccatissimo. Then brass. We're gonna load the staccatissimo patch as well. And finally, choir. And we're gonna select the staccatissimo phrases patch. Now at this point we've got all these patches loaded. The only thing that we are gonna do is make sure that the MIDI channel is set to 1. All of them should be set the same MIDI channel input and the same audio output, which is going to be 1 for everyone. So when we select this track and hit one note, we can hear all of them. The first thing that I want to do is to be able to control volume with CC11, and most of the modern libraries will come configured with that already mapped. Correct, it works. Fantastic. And also what I would like to do is to be able to control if I want choir or not, because many times I will not want to have choir. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna open this patch, which is choir. I'm gonna go here. I'm gonna make sure that I've got edit all groups selected, and I'm gonna go down here at amplifier. I'm gonna add a modifier, and I'm going to add a modulator that's going to be external sources MIDI CC. And in here, once it loads, I'm gonna set it to 2 -1. I'm not going to explain why -1, just trust me on this one, but 2 is because this fader is 2, it's breath control. It's MIDI CC 2, and I want this one to control the volume of the choir patch. So I'm gonna get out of here, and now with this I can control the volume of choir. No choir, choir. Still a little bit low in volume, so I'm going to bring up the volume here. And this is the exact reason why I did not map this to control this patch volume here. And I could have had this one control the volume directly, but I choose not to do this because the next step now it's going to be to balance these 4 instruments properly. And I'm going to use this volume to balance them. If I have a fader mapped to change one of these, then I'm gonna mess up volume. So I'm going to right click, remove MIDI automation. I'm gonna balance these 4 instruments the way I think they should be balanced for them to sound like a real orchestra. And just to demonstrate how useful this is, for example, if we put them all at standard volume, here's no choir. Up here, there's choir, but it's too soft. So clearly, for this to be balanced, I should bring this up a little bit. So when I bring it down, there's no choir, but then I can add as much choir as I want. It's a little bit too loud, but I actually have control over the volume of the choir. So if I needed to sound louder than usual, I could do that. So now I've got the freedom. And if I wanted to blend with the orchestra, I just need to bring it down a little bit. All right, so we're gonna balance this. So I'm gonna start without choir. And I'm gonna start just with the strings. And I'm gonna bring in the woods. So for woods, we want to hear them, but not too much. They won't stand out too much in an orchestration like this. So we want to have them in the mix, coloring the sound a little bit, but again, not to stand out too much. Now the next section is going to be brass. Now we're going to hear the brass. A little bit more. A little bit less. It depends on the sound that we want. Cool. All right. And now we've got choir here. So this is it. This would be the first track. And the way I would label this would be orchestral short. And then I would just indicate CC2 controls choir, meaning we can have choir or not. Just because sometimes we will forget that's there if we haven't used it for a while. Now, next track is going to be the same thing, but long notes. So in this case, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm just going to move a little bit faster because I've explained many of the things. But one more time, I'm going to go here. I'm going to load one track. It's going to have contact. And I'm going to load the sustained patches. So for the strings, I'm going to load this patch. For the woods, I'm going to load this patch. For brass, I'm going to load this patch. And for choir, I'm going to load two patches. I'm going to load this one and this one. So I'm going to track them all. And this is what we end having. The sustained strings, woodwinds, brass, choir. Now for the choir, I want to have control. So choir, no choir. But also I would like to be able to have control if I mute these tracks, so you can hear a little bit more closely. I would like to have control over hearing the A's or the O's type of sound. So O, A. So let's go step by step. First, we want to control volume for those two patches, and we're going to do the exact same thing that we've done earlier. We're going to go here. We'll make sure that we select edit all tracks, and then we're going to go down here. We're going to create here in modulator, amplifier mod. We're going to go to external sources, MIDI CC, click here. It will create one of these, and you're going to select two in this case because it's this one, which is breath control. I want this one to control the volume, and -1. So basically these two, it's controlling the amplifier, the volume, the output of the amplifier internally of this patch. So that's the first thing that we are doing, and we're going to do this for this patch and for this patch as well. And what this is giving us is control over volume, the output of the amplifier internally of each one of these patches. But also we wanted to be able to switch from this one to this one. The way we're going to do this is we're going to go again one by one. We're going to start with the A's, sustained A's, and same process. We're going to go here to amplifier mod. We're going to add a new external source, MIDI CC. Now in this case, this one is 13 for me. So this is 13. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create one that says 13 -1. And this again is going to, and this again is going to control the volume. Again, the output of the amplifier. So far so good. Now, when this goes down, we want no output. I'm going to solo this one. So no output. These are the A's. When I bring this up, so it's just like a second time around controlling volume. But if I configure the other one the same way, just inverted, which is exactly what I did the same thing again, add modulator, external sources, MIDI CC, and then again 13 -1, which is this one, but now I hit this invert button. And now if I solo this, when this is up, then there's no volume, and then when I bring it down, it's like actually bringing up the volume. And now the result is that if we put this sort of like in the middle, it's a combination of both of them. Bring down volume, there's no volume. If we bring it up, we've got both of them at the same time. But then up here we can decide O's or A's. And then we can do this type of swells with O's, very soft, and then bring them up and change to A's. So just with a few tweaks, we gain a lot of control, and we haven't even talked about. So we can do the same thing. Start with the orchestra, bring up the choir, transition. And we're gonna label this the same way. It's gonna be long. And maybe we can simplify this. We can say 2 is choir. And then we can do transition from O's to A's. So like this. Yes. Sometimes if I add more letters, then there's no space. So that's why I kept it shorter like this. But label it in a way that makes sense to you. All right, so these are the first 2 patches that you saw me doing the entire process. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna load the rest of the patches and I'm gonna go one by one and I'm gonna explain exactly what I did. All right, so we've got the orchestral short, the orchestral long notes, then we've got percussion. So for percussion, if I open this patch, it's this one here. So I loaded all these percussion instruments, and as you can see, each one of these patches is mapped in a specific area of the keyboard. So if you load all of them, you're gonna have in the keyboard access to Grand Casa in the lower region of the keyboard, and toms low, toms high, snares, snares high, piatti, and tam tam. And you can access the Grand Casa here. It has rolls as well. Toms here, similar structure, hits here, rolls here. Same thing for the toms high, starting here, rolls here. Snares low, same concept, hits here, rolls here. And then swells, shorter one, longer one, etc. Same thing for the higher pitched the snares, comparing to the low ones. And then we've got the piatti up here, and the tam tam. Then we've got choir, and choir is the exact same configuration that the one that we've described earlier, but just in this case is not mixed with the orchestral long notes. So again, choir long notes, O's or A's, and we can control dynamics and volume. Unfortunately, Nucleus has no piano, but it loaded a piano because I need to have a piano in my template, but you can use one of your pianos. Now I loaded this piano track 3 times, literally 3 instruments, and you may think 3 instruments gonna take 3 times the amount of RAM. Actually, in Contact, even when you're using separate instances, if you load one patch and then in another instance you load the exact same patch, it's not going to load on RAM 2 times or three times in this case. So I did that. Now 3 contacts, yes, the second and the third contact takes a little bit more of CPU processing. Another way that we could have done this is having 1 instrument track and then having 2 extra MIDI tracks that are routed to that initial instrument track. We can do that as well. This gives me a little bit more of routing freedom. I could have gone the second route if I want to optimize this a little bit more. If I would have gone the second route, and what I could do is to get rid of this track, and instead of loading a new track, we would have this piano, which is an instrument track. If we open it, it's this one. But then we would have this one, which is a MIDI track that is routed to this piano instrument track, which essentially is this one, and make sure that the MIDI channel is set to 1, because this track is configured to 1. And then when we play this one, actually plays this one as well, and now we are not having a second contact instance. Now for this one, it actually is a second contact instance because it's routed differently, and we've got a reverb inserted so we can have sort of like a wet piano. And yes, we could set up a send and deciding how much reverb we want in this track, but sometimes we may want to have a sort of like a drier piano and having a more wet piano at the same time. So we are gonna continue with horns, and with CC2 we have the ability to control if we want a legato patch or a sustain patch. If we go with the sustain patch, we will have the ability to perform chords and if we go legato, then we can perform legato lines. And the way we've done this is the same way I've configured the choir, and I explained this earlier on. Trumpets, same exact thing. We're gonna have the trumpets here, and we can have sustain for chords. Or we can do legato. One thing that I'll mention, I'll go back to horns, is that if you combine both of them, you can get the sound of 12 horns. You lose the ability to do chords in a way that actually sounds natural, because you're gonna hear a little bit of the legato transition from one of the patches, but if you do just one note, you can hear the 12 horns sound. And the same thing with trumpets. Then we've got the strings short here, not much to say here. I've done a few tweaks to all of these patches I haven't mentioned, but usually I'll go to advanced and I'll tweak the thing. For example, in this case, there's just a little bit of room reverb for longer strings type of sound. We're gonna have sort of like a whole longer reverb and things like this. Basically, I configured everything, so it's easy to use and sounds good out of the box, meaning if you load the patches that I created and use this template, everything should be balanced and everything should be easy to use and should sound good. All right, now for the longer strings, we've got control over the typical things. We've got dynamics, the volume, and vibrato. So no vibrato, vibrato. So if we use the three of them, we can go from, softer type of thing with no vibrato, and using the three of them is going to give us, like theoretically, if we used just this one, it would give us everything that we need. But it's a sample library, and we need to help it a little bit. So this sounds good, but if we use expression to control volume, we can go softer. And if on top of this we use vibrato, which is the natural way a musician would do it, then we add a little bit of character towards the end. I've got two of these patches. One is a duplicate, because sometimes I need to ensemble strings patch. Brush short notes, which sounds good. It's quite decent for a library, which, hey, it's not cheap, but it gives you a lot for the price. And this is a pretty good sounding brass sound. It's a little bit drier than other libraries if we compare this to some of the original Albion 1 recordings from Spitfire. But basically the only thing that we've got is these pads here and a few more tweaks. In this case, it has whole reverb because it sounded quite dry, so I helped it a little bit with reverb. Longs, just one pad, a little bit more of reverb than the other one. Woodwinds short notes. It's pretty standard woodwinds sound. There are other libraries like the Albion 1 that has a little bit more of flutes character. Then there's the Cine Samples Holy Woodwinds that has a little bit more of double reeds character to it, so you can hear more the oboes, for example. And this one is pretty well balanced. Again, it's an ensemble patch, so you don't have that much control over the sound, but sounds pretty good to me. And then the long notes. And in this case, we also have control over the vibrato amount, so we can have no vibrato, or add a little bit of vibrato, which usually it's more noticeable the higher you go in range. So that's it. This is the end of the first video, and we talked about this first group of tracks. In the next video, we're gonna talk about these ones, and then we're gonna have a third one with these ones, and then it's gonna finish the first half of this section. In the second half, we're gonna compose a la James Easton Howard. Will try to replicate a little bit the feel and sound and the style of the Raya and the Last Dragon soundtrack. We'll pick one of the orchestral sound type of tracks, and we'll go with that. See you in the next video.